Good morning from Tryon Palace, or maybe possibly afternoon. We just wanted to check in with you guys and share a little bit of our gardens this morning. We're going to be particularly on the Latham and Hawk side, which we haven't gotten to check in with you on lately. So we just wanted to focus on some of the blooms we've got coming our way. If you've got questions as we go, feel free to leave those in the comments below, and we will answer those as we have time. All right, I'm going to take over with this. So the Latham Garden, as many of you may know, is kind of our crown jewel due to a multitude of these lovely hedges. This is actually mostly Yaupon holly, dwarf Yaupon holly hedges, but behind me you can actually see we do have this extra side here that we're focusing on now is actually boxwood. So you can see as we look at both of them, they're fairly similar. We find that boxwood does not do as well for us here in North Carolina because it is pretty toasty. As you can see, it's a bright sunny day here, which we're super grateful for post the rainy weather we've had the last few days. But we've got lots of plants that are starting to bloom here at the palace. We've changed over all of our gardens at this point, so we've actually got some things starting. So if you look here, this is our pentas bed. Pentas are a great summer annual. You can tell that there's a few of those white little blooms starting to come up. Switching around. But so we actually have the ability for those to be a great kind of cover for us throughout the summer. So those do bloom for about 7-8 months. They're great annuals, and I'll get in a little closer so you guys can see those. White blooms, they're a perfect pollinator plant, one of our favorites to kind of use on that style. You can also see they're still fairly short. Our gardens got changed in the beginning of May, so we're still kind of in between on that, but we do have a lot of things just coming into bloom, getting ready for all of you when we can rejoin each other. So these are some of our salvia. Salvia is in the sage family, so if you didn't know, these actually can be a perennial, just like your culinary sage. I would not recommend eating these though. But salvia are a great pollinator plant and a really hardy annual to perennial depending on how much time you have to establish them. This particular variety is a Farinaceae, Salvia farinaceae, which is one of our better varieties. You'll see a lot of Salvia splendens in kind of box stores, but we tend to find that those are a bit unhappy in our climate and don't quite behave as we dream. We've also got a lot of our beautiful daylilies starting to bloom. We have several varieties, a lot of the ones that you'd kind of consider normal, but we've also got some kind of weirder tall ones that we have throughout the gardens as well. Unfortunately, a lot of these are far older than my time here at the palace, and so I do not know their names, but a great variety of daylilies. One big thing to note with daylilies, and you can kind of see it in this bed we're coming up on here, daylilies are often used as a ground cover, which is a little bit unfortunate because they really aren't a good ground cover. So you can see that they're actually a little bit thin under the grass. And so if you have daylilies in your yard that you've been trying to use as a ground cover and having a lot of weed issues, that's part of why, because they're actually not used to being used in that fashion. So you'll see a little bit of that throughout the space. One of my favorite plant combinations we can see here. So this is actually a Siberian iris. They're kind of at the end of their bloom peak. You see the seed pods on them here. But behind them is bronze fennel, which has just started blooming. This is a cousin to the bulb fennel that you may know from recipes. It is edible, but you eat the leaves on this instead of kind of the root or stem. It's a great pollinator plant. You can see they get fairly tall. These ones are about 6 foot, and they die back to the ground every year. They'll self-seed a little bit, but one of the best pollinator larval foods for swallowtail caterpillars in particular. You'll also see that they're just starting to bloom at the top. They've got these little bitsy yellow blooms, but we find that they actually will get butterfly visitors throughout the year as well. And then one of our last ones in this combination, this is Baptisia in its vegetative stage. So you may have seen some of our photos of this in early April when it was actually blooming. But you can see this is actually in the pea family. So it's got those kind of chunky pea-like blooms, a really solid perennial. We have had some issues in the last few years with it here in New Bern with several species of caterpillars that have been eating it, which is new to us, but we're, trying to be pollinator friendly, even to our more annoying caterpillar friends. And so those are actually, I believe, a type of moth that are eating the plant in the larval stage. They eat significantly through most of the plant, but since these are all three of them tender perennials, as you can see here, they'll actually die all the way back to the ground in the winter, and then they'll come back up every year new. So something to keep in mind if you do have plants that are being significantly eaten down by caterpillars, either moth or butterfly, most of those plants, if they're perennials, will come back the next year. You may just have to baby them a little bit in the meantime. So we're going to peek back here and pan around, hopefully if I can make this behave nicely for me, through the Latham. So you can see some of the beauteous splendor that's happening throughout the garden. We've got lots of new things blooming, but one of my favorites, and we talked about this a little bit in our wilderness walk several weeks ago, but I just wanted to show you guys, this is absolutely one of my favorite plants. This is an Oakleaf Hydrangea, Hydrangea quercifolia, and they are stunning. So I don't know if you guys can quite see in the sunlight up above that we're getting a lot of little pollinators across here, but really stunning blooms. If I can zoom in on this, you'll see there are actually ants on these. So these are pollinators, which many people don't realize. A lot of us tend to think of ants as those pesky little creatures that invade our house and cause chaos lines in our kitchens, but they actually are great pollinators for some of these little blooms. So there are some honeybees on the far side over there buzzing in and out, but a really great plant all around. The one downfall I'd say of this plant is that it is deciduous in the winter, meaning it loses all of its leaves. But if you look closely here, it does still have these really intriguing kind of peeling bark, almost like a crepe myrtle, that provides some interesting structure. If they ever figure out a way to make non-deciduous, evergreen quercifolias, hydrangeas, you can expect I will never have another plant in my yard at home. But they do get up to a really nice size. They also take pruning pretty easily. So if this lovely size is not your style for your garden, they can actually be a much smaller size as well. There are actually a few cultivars that have come out that are as short as 1 to 2 feet. So we're going to peek out back here into the Hawk's Alley. This is one of my kind of favorite areas since it was a bit of a pet project for me. And many of you may not have seen it since it's kind of changed. So as you look down and across the Hawk's Alley, this is one of our gardens that we've actually been in the process of turning into a pollinator prairie. And so at one point in time, the Hawk's Alley had very formal hedges around each statue, which you may have seen in our behind the scenes kind of look at palace gardens over time. But we actually decided to modify this a little bit. We were having a lot of issues. As most of you know, we are fairly small staff, and so this was a huge garden to have to deal with kind of annual plantings in. So we've added a lot of different things. One of the really amazing things about pollinator prairies, other than you get to watch a ton of pollinators, is that it gives you a lot of different seasons of color. So you can see over here, these darker bushes are actually barberries. So they have this really unique kind of red foliage They'll bloom later in the season, but not really significant blooms. But they are evergreen or ever red, and so they do keep us with some color kind of across the time period. These really tall things you see here are one of the Rudbeckia species, one of the black-eyed Susan family members. These particular ones are actually about 7 feet tall, so much, much larger than what you'd expect on our regular black-eyed Susans. But so you'll see we also have daylilies blooming out here. There's a lot of different things that are kind of coming up. A lot of our goldenrod is starting to shoot up. Many of our echinacea, our purple coneflower that you can see here. And then also our gaillardias, or blanket flowers, which you may be familiar with, used at the beach to kind of help hold in dunes. So lots of flowers on the precipice of bloom. One of my particular favorites, these are actually called balloon flowers, and many people don't realize it because they see this open bloom form, but this, that looks kind of like a hot air balloon, is actually how they got their name. So you can actually pop them open if you get them at just the right time, but really unique plants, a great perennial. They've actually come on the market in a lot of different colors now. So this is the kind of standard, I think sentimental blue is the varietal name on that one. But there are a lot of new colors and cultivars out that vary in heights and bloom sizes as well. And if they'll stay, I'll actually show you one of our little pollinators who's out here. So we've got, it looks like one of our native bees who's out here buzzing. I can't quite tell 100%, but this may actually be one of our longhorn bees. And you can see that the pollinators are jousting to see who gets to maintain it. But so we do have a ton of different pollinators that live out here. It's a really diverse area for them. And so with all pollinator gardens, that's something that's really important, and we'll talk more about later this month as we get into National Pollinator Week. Another great one, and you can see the popularity on this one, this is Stokesia aster. So we've got a carpenter bee who's actually hanging out and pollinating on those. Yes, for all of you who hate carpenter bees, they are pollinators. Sorry, you gotta be patient with them. They're actually really fun pollinators because they don't have that sting potential you get from some of the others. They're also pollinators on this purple agastache or anise hyssop. So they actually come out, carpenter bees are one of our earliest pollinators in North Carolina. They tend to come out as early as kind of February, where other bees will wait a little bit longer. We don't tend to see bumblebees until April-ish. But a really, really great pollinator that provides a fair amount of fun to watch, even if they do tend to make little nests in your porch. Just try and find a spot where you can have them instead. So again, this plant is Stokes aster. It is not blooming out of season. Stokes aster actually blooms in the summer. So a really great one that handles some kind of wicked heat out here. We'll look through a few other things in this garden. This particular plant is Lespedeza. If you are from a family of farmers, you may know and hate this plant. This is bush clover Lespedeza, so not quite as aggressive as some of the smaller species that are a little more individual, but definitely something that gets a bad rap, I think. It's a really large, beautiful bush. This one actually we pruned all the way back to the ground last year because it had gotten to be about 10 feet tall. So you can see we cut it down, it came back up, and right now it's about 6 feet right now. There's also a white variety of this, but this blooms for a really long time. Kind of has almost, kind of in line with a butterfly bush, but a lot hardier. So butterfly bushes for us down here can be a little bit iffy. Some of our older cultivars do well, but it's a very hot, yuck summer for us, and that doesn't always kind of bring about success in some of our butterfly bushes. that we have here. So we'll sneak a view. Looking down the pleached allée, you can see these hedges that have been pruned to kind of maintain. This is Yopon holly, not the dwarf variety, so it's much, much taller. And then looking through to the Latham on one side, and as we look back the other way, out through the wilderness and across the river. So this is the Trent River, if you're not familiar with our site. We've got a few other fun little things to show you. One of my favorite plants has just started to pop out. I've actually got one blooming in my own yard, but this is Vitex, a chase tree, and a wonderful, wonderful pollinator plant. You can see those buds haven't quite opened yet, but a really, really great one that honestly, if I could, I'd plant it everywhere. It falls in the category of high love along with the Oakleaf Hydrangeas. You can also see this Oakleaf Hydrangea here behind it is one of the newer cultivars. So some of our Oakleaf Hydrangeas are the kind of old-fashioned solid white, but some of them actually have multicolors. So this variety is a white that fades out to pink. And a lot of these will do this in the fall, but some of the newer cultivars actually do this in the spring as well. Or summer, whatever season you count us in. So coming up, I just wanted to show you guys, I think we've talked about this a little bit to some extent, but they are both in bloom right now, so it's a perfect time. So this above us, this big monster tree, is a southern magnolia, Magnolia grandiflora. You either know and love it or know and hate it or some combination of in between. But if the problem you have is that it's too large, it drops too many leaves, etc., I would encourage you to check out Swamp Bay magnolias. They're a really great one. They handle wet conditions, and as you can see, they actually do still have these magnolia blooms that you're very much used to. They're a little bit smaller, so here's my hand up next to it for comparison, but they do still have that foliage that's kind of symbolic of magnolias, but also those lovely, lovely blooms. And even the spent blooms are pretty on these because they're not as big, they don't get damaged, and they don't drop their petals as fast. The one guaranteed way, as we've talked about, just a reminder, to tell Swamp Bay magnolias from other species is that they always have this kind of white or silver back. So really, really, if you're looking for one of these, if you see that it has a green back, no matter what the nursery has it labeled, it is not a Sweet Bay magnolia. This one's been here for probably 10, 15 years. So as you can see, they don't grow as crazily as the others. This monster one over above us is actually one of the originals, I believe, from the palace rebuilding. So it's about 60 years old. So something to consider. Magnolias are lovely trees, but this only took 60 years. And it's been this big for a long time. So as we come up through the wilderness, we just wanted to share a few with you. This is another one of those lovely Vitex. You can see it's got a really interesting tree shape. This ends up being kind of a large tree, or large shrub, small tree, but a really kind of neat vase-shaped tree. Interesting characteristics. I actually decorate mine in the winter when it loses its leaves and hang ornaments and lights from it. So a fun one year round. You'll also see our buckeyes above us. They've started to produce some amount of fruit. So it is not edible, but if you're a squirrel, it sounds good. But that's that fruit, and this tree is a great one for blooming pretty early in the season, around early April, sometimes even late March if we get a great year. But it's one of those that we really love the shape. It provides a lot of shade. You can see, even though these aren't particularly large trees, that we're getting some great shade coverage out of them, which is important considering I think I've heard it that today may be 90 degrees, which I can't believe, but there we are. So as we finish up for our quick one today, I just wanted to share a couple little last minute things for those of you who may not have gotten to visit the top of the Latham. So if you aren't local, you may not know what this magical plant is, but this is Confederate Jasmine. This is the kind of best known, most well-loved southern plant. I promise you that if I could give you smell-o-vision right now, I would, because it is absolutely fragrant and an amazing plant. You can even see back here, as we get closer to our trellis, are you going to stay still? That we have little bees on it across the plant. So this is going to historically be larger bees like bumblebees and carpenter bees, but this is actually a pollinator perennially blooming vine, and so we really love that. To finish us out for today, I just wanted to show you a few more pictures, or a few more kind of plants. So these are some of our gardenias in the background that are blooming. They're another really great fragrant one, so I am enjoying the scent of all of this right now and wishing I could share it with you. And then we actually have a few of our Asiatic lilies that are blooming here as well. So a really great one to kind of diversify if you've only dealt with kind of Easter lilies or potentially just kind of daylily styles. There's a lot of other plants that can be really useful. They grow pretty tall and are a really nice kind of filler plant. They come in a lot of other colors as well, and you can actually see we've got a little waspy who's trying to visit and pollinate some of those. And then for our closeout, I'll give you one of my favorite orange bloomers. So this is an ornamental pomegranate, and you can see it's just got kind of a psychotic colored orange bloom, almost a coral. We really love these. We have a lot of these on site of the pomegranate family. This one is our only ornamental one, so it's worth noting that even the ones you can eat produce the blooms this color. So without further ado, we just wanted to wish you a happy midweek day. Hope you're having a good week, and we'll close out on an upper view of the Latham. Have a wonderful day and a great rest of your week.